So now that Greg and I have talked about these different lighting fixtures, I want to talk to you a little bit about how we control that light. And we're going to be doing it all over the place over the next few days. I'm going to talk first about one of my favorite ways to create fill light, especially for lighting and shooting interviews, which is really the bread and butter of what a lot of us do for a living. So this is just a little nano stand here, which is a collapsible, very small light stand. And on here I have what's called a mini grip head. This one's made by Matthews, and something called a mini Mathellini. If you've ever seen a Cardellini clamp or a Mathellini clamp, this is just a small version of that. So nano stand, mini grip head, mini Mathellini, and I have a reflector. This particular one isn't made anymore, but it has a little silver gold on one side and it has white on the other. I generally use white all of the time. And because it has a rigid handle, and there are other reflectors on the market that do have rigid handles, I can go ahead and set that light, and I call it a light because it is actually filling in and doing a job. Anywhere I want, I can lock it down, and because of that rigid handle, it stays where it's supposed to stay. And this is, again, something that I use all of the time, especially for lighting and shooting interviews. When you get into larger spaces, you may want to use an actual light for your fill light, or if you are shooting lots and lots of interviews over and over in a space, sometimes what we'll do is we'll take an actual light source, like that little remote phosphor light that I showed you earlier on, that Matchbox, or another bicolor light, and we'll bounce it off of a reflector like this, usually off of white. And we can just dial up and down how much fill we want depending on the person that's sitting there. So that's a great solution for that. So let me move this out of the way. Let's talk about this right here. So this is a 40-inch arm coming off of this C-stand. And if you look here, I've got this little solar light. There's a pin, and this pin is what's allowing me to take this 5/8 female attachment and attach it to this arm here. Pins don't generally come with C-stand rentals. You have to buy them separately. I always have 2 or 3 of them with me when I travel. They're a little heavy, they're inexpensive, $8 to $10. And that way, when you rent some C-stands, when you show up at a location, you always have a way to attach a light like this. So definitely something you should have inside of your kit. You'll also see here that it's rigged in a really smart way, where the 5/8 is now attached to a 3/8, which is now on a Manfrotto ball head. I use these things all of the time, and I'm really happy that Greg does as well, because it gives us complete control in terms of the position of the light. And we don't have to mess with all of this stuff. We don't have to take the head here and loosen it and turn it and all that stuff. And then we have another C-stand hooked up here. And this is not something you have to use all the time. You can rent or buy big wood or metal cucurullas or cookies, which break up a light pattern. This is a piece of camo from an Army-Navy store. And we just take a couple of A-clamps, put that in here, and when we shine a single light source here, like a Fresnel light, we get a nice breakup pattern for a background if we want to use it. So that's a really cool solution. And the ever important, and should always be there in your kit, tennis ball. And you should have quite a few of these. They're easy to travel with. If you go to a rental house, they should have some. If they don't, just go pick some up from a sporting goods store and put them on the ends of these arms, because it's the difference between somebody getting hurt on set and not. Good, so that's that stuff. And I've got a few more things to show you. This is something that a lot of people have been using in production for a long time, especially for narrative projects. It's called a book light. Sometimes it's called a 7-minute drill because a crew usually takes about 7 minutes to build it. But it doesn't look exactly like this. The whole concept of a book light is you're taking a light source into something that you're going to bounce light off of, and then go through some sort of diffusion, and that's going to become your light source. So it's a bounce and diffuse type of light control. And what it does is it creates an incredibly soft wrapped light around your subject matter. And whether it's objects or people that you're shooting, it's a fantastic way to light things. People always look good when they're lit with book lights. So we're going to use this a lot. This is an actual freestanding book light. It's based on a system called Scrimgeour Cine from Westcott. And this is a kit that I actually designed. And it collapses down into individual parts. It's very modular. These are two 4x6 frames. And what we have here is we have an unbleached muslin, which is a great soft bounce source. On the other side of it, it actually has Duvetine, so you can use that for negative fill or to block light. On this side here, we also have a white and silver bounce, so you have a lot of options in terms of how you can bounce the light. And over here for diffusion, a 3/4 stop diffusion, which is great if you don't have lights that have a lot of output. And then my favorite for diffusion here is a half grid cloth. So my favorite combination is the unbleached muslin and a half grid cloth. We might use a different combination for the shoot, but this is going to be used a lot in this production. You can even break it apart into separate frames, build other sizes, so it's really an erector set of lighting control. Over here, I have taken this little 2-section articulating arm from Manfrotto, and I've attached this little frame, a modified version of a flex frame from Westcott, with a ball mount, so we can position it wherever we want. And this is allowing me to now take this light off of a single light stand, and I'm pushing it into, right now, a 4-foot by 4-foot piece of beadboard. This was picked up at a home improvement store. Lowe's, I think, for this one. We bought this in a 4-foot by 8-foot piece, cut it in half. You've got two 4x4s. In fact, another trick that we don't have here is you can then cut this or score this in half and put white gaff tape on it so it stays together. And then you can fold it into a 2x4 so it's easy to put in the trunk of a car or in the back of a car. And we've attached this with a Quacker clamp, which is perfect for this type of material because it's very lightweight. And again, we get this beautiful bounce source. To me, this is one of the easiest ways to create Rembrandt lighting, where you get that nice little triangle of light. This is kind of a temporary solution. When I want it to be more permanent, I'm going to use a frame like this. This is also built on Scrimgeour Cine. This is called the DP kit, and it's built out of 22-inch tubes, so you can actually travel with it, sling it over your shoulder. And again, it's got these little connectors here so it breaks down. And right now what I have is I have a white and a silver. The white could be used in place of this beadboard and this Quacker clamp, and I just take a Mathilini clamp and we can just attach it, and we'll probably use this in the course a lot as well. This is also fantastic if you put diffusion in front of it or you bounce off of it to put outside of a window. It's used all the time. Our Joker 400 bug or 800 bug pushed into this is going to create a really, really nice soft source coming into a room. As we saw before, we kind of got lucky here and we found this big frosted panel of glass. But what happens when you don't have that? Well, what you can do is you can bounce a light source right off of something like a 4x4 frame. We could also bounce it off of something like this, the book light, rigged, but just break the frame apart and have a 4x6 out there. By the way, this can actually break down. We can make a 6x6 out of it as well. And we can create a similar type of effect just using this frame-based system. So that's pretty awesome. So speaking of 4x4 lighting control, one of the other things that we use all of the time to control light is something called a floppy cutter. And this is a version of the floppy cutter. We actually have one on a rigid frame that's hung outside here to help stop the light coming into the space so it's more controlled. This is using the DP kit, which is a portable 4x4 frame, but we actually have the same version here, but in a portable kit. So you can see here this 4-foot by 4-foot piece of Duvetine opens up to a 4x8, and we can use this as a big negative fill source, especially outdoors, but indoors as well. And we can block huge light sources. And when we talk about getting away from the idea of that sort of traditional 3-point and 4-point lighting, and we're using single big key sources, one of the things that you're going to have to deal with is light bouncing all over the place. That's where things like floppy cutters come in handy, because we can take a lot of light spill that's going on in the background. we can control that using something like this, and we can now get that really beautiful wrapped light, but we don't have to have a small softbox, which is a smaller surface area, which is a much better way to light, in my opinion. So there you go. That's a little overview of some lighting control. Instruments and fixtures and frames and all kinds of stuff. We're going to be showing you more in the course, but I think that's a good overview so that when we go through everything and you start to see this stuff being used, you'll know what the job is of each of these tools.